there was a recent adjustment to the population of China, right? Because when the way I understand it is when the way the Chinese government does census on their population is when there's no birth certificates. So the way I understand it is when the doctor comes to first give a child his vaccinations, that's one way. Or when a child gets admitted to primary school, that's another way. That's usually not until they're like 4 or 5, maybe. Is that correct? Or are you aware of?
Well, I know that the Chinese population data has been massaged by so many people
right. Well,
for so long.
I'm sure the education system, they get subsidized by the government, right? So they want to inflate that number of people that they have to earn more money.
There was once, I think that was in 2013, there was an effort by the Ministry of Public Security to kind of to scrub their population data. So they organized 500,000 police across the country to conduct. They went through the population data. They found 350 million fake IDs from their 1.3 billion population database over 48 hours. It was an effort. Within 2 days, they deployed 500,000 policemen across the country to scrub the data. They found 350 million fake IDs out of 1.3 billion people. And this was actually documented. This whole effort was actually on the website of the Ministry of Public Security. They later took it down because it was too much information, because that's, a quarter of China's population? Right?
Yeah. Well, actually, it's the 0.3, right, of the 1.3 billion.
20, yeah. So that was that. And also in 2013, if you look at the official census data, China had, I think it was 260 million kids or children, school-age children, 260 million. However, if you look at, going to your point about vaccines, according to vaccine data, only 100 million children from 8 months old to 16 years old had vaccination. Or
how many?
100 million.
100 million.
So assuming it was an annual event, so they were saying that there's this huge discrepancy, right? You had 260 million students, but you only have 100 million children from 8 months old to 16 years old. Not everyone in this bracket is student, because the 8-month-old doesn't go to school. Mm-hmm. So how could you have so fewer children, getting vaccines when you have so many students? Well, the answer is the local governments inflate their student population to get funding from the central government.
Right.
So, but if you look at the discrepancies, it's huge. It's like 100 million versus 260 million. It's crazy.
Yeah.
But that's why China's population data, the census data, is just convoluted.
Yeah, and I'm sure it takes a while for it to catch up, right? Because it's going to have, if the census data if they're taking census data on people after they enter school, I'm not sure when they typically do it. Like, do they do it at the beginning? Do they do it?
Well, supposedly when a kid is born, you need to register, with the local police bureau, so that you get an ID, right? You get a household ID. Like so here we have a social security number.
Right.
There you get an ID. So the kid is in the system, right? And then you get vaccinations, stuff like that. But the person should exist in the system. But birth certificates can be bought. Hospitals sell birth certificates for profit. Doctors sell that. You could get fake IDs.
Why would they do this? Why would people do this?
To buy real estate. Sometimes to get a fake, just to have a fake ID, to buy real estate. Or for example, my kid is born in a rural area, right? And I want my kid to be able to go to school in Beijing or Shanghai, in the large cities. But I can't go there because of this household registration system. Like, you can't move around to go to school in another city if you are in this local. So what I want to do is buy a fake ID for my kid in Shanghai or Beijing, a fake ID, so that later when he or she is older, he or she can go to school there.
Wow.
You know, if I have the money, all you need is money.
What is the penalty for being busted for doing this?
If everyone is doing it, who are you going to punish?
So, yeah, you're right. That's a lot of people.
Right? And usually the people who are doing this are the ones with money. And they use money to take care of everything.
How many fake IDs did you say that
There's
they found?
a lot.
You said it was a couple 100 million?
350 million.
Jesus.
Out of 1.3 billion people.
That is bananas. That if that's happening to some degree at that level, and I'm sure you can't, I mean, that takes a long time to make a 300 million fake IDs. That is a symptom of a very deep rot within.
That 350 million does not include people who have died and whose IDs still exist in the system. Those are only fake IDs, meaning the person never exists, or duplicate IDs, I should say. Mm-hmm. You know, you have one person having two IDs.
Sure.
That's duplicate IDs. But this does not include people who are 150 years old who are still in the system and the children are still collecting social benefits.
Right.
Yeah. Or people who have migrated to U.S. and who still getting benefits in China.
Mm. Yeah. There's the fact that exists. I mean, that's a huge problem and a symptom to a huge institutional problem. Like, why would they not allow somebody born in a rural area to go work in a metropolitan area or in a different city?
Well, because if that happens, then no one wants to live in the rural area, right? I mean, that's the whole quote unquote beauty of communism from the perspective of the CCP leaders. They control where everyone lives. They control how much money you make. They control what job you do. They control everything. In the old days, they even control who you date, who you marry. They control every aspect of people's life.
Steve, I want some stats on Chinese healthcare, mortality rate, cancer rates, obesity, compared to the U.S.
Chinese probably do better in obesity, but cancer...
Cancer's pretty bad.
It's very bad.
New cancer cases, China is expected to have approximately 4.8 million new cancer cases, while the U.S. is expected to have around 2.3 million. But is this
the population?
The population is what in China?
You asked me. Officially, 1.4 billion.
Oh, so it's realistically 1 billion, right?
Definitely under 1 billion.
It's under 1 billion, but is it close to a billion? You think? Is it close under, or is it far under?
Far under.
How far?
You are ready for the number?
Yes.
At one point, I projected under 400 million.
What?
500 million. Under 500 million.
Under 500 million. Mm-hmm. So you think that they have a very similar population to the United States and China?
Yes. Wow. There's 1 billion people missing.
And this goes back to what we were saying in the beginning or earlier in the podcast with all of the fake IDs and all of this stuff being found out.
Yeah, there's possibly 1 billion people missing. It's not a demographic question, Danny. It's a mathematical question. Let me ask you. It takes a couple to have 2 children to replace themselves, right? Think about it.
Yes, 2 children.
If every couple produces 2 children.
The population stinks level.
Right. So do you know how many children does every woman needs to have in her lifetime in order to triple its population in 50 years?
To triple its population in 50 years, you need to have what? Let me guess. I'm terrible at math.
I'll give you the answer because I asked AI. It's a crazy mathematical. If a country needs to triple or grow its population by 2.5 times. Let's just say 2.5 times.
Okay.
Over a span of 50 years.
5 kids?
Each woman, you're right, each woman needs to give birth on average between 4.5 to 5.5 children.
Wow.
Okay. Now, China grew its population officially from 1950. That's when the CCP took over to control. Okay, China's population in 1950 was about 500 million. In the year 2000, 50 years later, China's population was about 1.27 billion. Okay, so it grew 2.5 times, right? From 500 million to 1.27 billion. That's 2.5 times over 50 years. Chinese women did not have, on average, have 5 children because of the one-child policy.
Yes.
Because of the Great Famine. Because of the Great Famine, tens of millions of people died. Because of Cultural Revolution. So China, from one political movement to another, and then to almost 4 decades of single-child policy, there's no way Chinese women had 5 kids. Actually, the average fertility rate for each woman was 1.7 for the 30 year from 1990 to 2020. Okay, Chinese average fertility rate is probably 2 from the 50 years. So it's a mathematical question. There's no way Chinese women gave birth to 5 kids from the time the CCP took control to year 2000. That's my argument number 1.
Okay.
So there's no way China could have reached 1.27 billion people by the year 2000.
Right.
Okay?
Then why did they implement the one-child policy in the first place?
They thought they have too many people.
Did they really think they had too many people, or were they just trying to project?
I think the country was on the brink of bankruptcy. They could not afford to raise that many people.
Okay.
And then the second question, that was a mathematical question. And anyone who's in statistics can calculate that. Second question is a comparative study. India in 1990 had a population of 900 million, or about 900 million, which is only 200 million under China's population of 1.1 million, or 1.1 billion.
In 1990?
1990.
Okay.
There were only 200 million people apart.
Yes.
Within 20%.
Okay.
Okay. Now, over the next 30 years, China's fertility rate, according to the government, is 1.7, meaning every woman gives birth or gave birth to 1.7 kids. India's fertility rate is double that, is over 3. Okay? So how could, 30 years later, so now we're in 2020, how could China still have more people than India?
Right. They wouldn't. India would pass them.
Mathematically, it's impossible. So I asked AI, how many people should China have, assuming their fertility rate is correct in the year 2020? Right? AI gave me 900 million.
Wow.
900 million. And then now the 1.7 fertility rate was overstated. That's the official number. So experts believe China's real fertility rate during the 30 year was 1.3.
Right, with the famine issues, with the pollution,
and then the one-child policy.
And the one-child policy combined would be devastating for birth rate.
Yeah. So the official. So if I applied the real fertility rate of 1.3, China's population in the year 2020 was only 700 million. 700 million. Okay?
That's wild.
It's a mathematical question.
And you think the government is not aware of this? Or you think they have to be, right?
I think China's population never reached 1.4 billion. In fact, it probably never reached 1 billion. Because how could you? You have 30, it takes a couple to have 2 children to keep the population flat.
Sure, exactly.
You have single child policy for 3 decades and more. How could you grow how could your population grow so much? I mean, the whole world has been fooled. I mean, it's a simple mathematical question.
Yeah, I would be curious to hear what the conventional answer would be to something like this, right? Like, how would somebody explain this away? Is this question not being asked?
I don't know.
By
I
anybody?
raised the question. Well, so that's one question. So how many people did China have before COVID? Okay, my answer is about 800 million, somewhere around 800 million.
Steve, you got ChatGPT handy? Okay.
And then the next question is how many people died during the pandemic in China?
In China.
It's not the official 120,000. China's official COVID casualty is 120,000. Okay, that's less than the 1.2 million in the U.S. We had the worldwide casualty was 7 million. I think the U.S. has the bulk of it.
Yeah,
1.2 million.
Mm-hmm.
No matter how you look at it, China's real death during the pandemic is in the hundreds of millions.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Actually,
what is the population split between elderly and young people?
I mean, it's older. It's the average age is old. It's 40 something. Okay. Yeah. But someone asked Grok 3 this question, a Chinese, and said, please, tell me how many people, please estimate how many people died during COVID in China. And Grok 3 built a reasoning model, collected economic data, consumption data, and estimated that the number of population that got shed during the 3 year from 2020 to 2022 was between 150 million and 250 million.
And where did it pull this information from?
Official data.
Official data.
Yeah. And that doesn't include the casualties that we continue to see from 2020 until now. People are still dying. And I have, how many, the Chinese government has suspended the data on its funeral industry. It stopped publishing statistics on its funeral burial industry. And yet we've seen local governments building so many crematoriums and funeral homes. There was one province that I saw, which one was that? I think maybe Shanxi, was it Shanxi? But one of the provinces, it had, I think, about 40, it was a population with, I think, maybe 30 million people. It was not a big province. It had about 40, or estimated to have under 50 crematoriums and funeral homes. They're now building 80 additional. So if you didn't have that kind of death, why would you double or triple?
Right. Unless business was booming.
Right.
Wow.
So it's a mind-boggling topic. I mean, I didn't feel good when I did my program on that because I could accept that China has 800 million people, but no matter how I look at it, if hundreds of millions of people died, that brings China's population from 800 million down to like 500 million or even lower. What I think is the most pressing issue or the biggest variable, shall we say, that has not been getting enough attention in the West is the fact that Xi Jinping is losing power and losing power very quickly. In fact, he might have already completely lost power. He's only a figurehead. He's only a puppet. Although I can't say that for sure, I don't, but that seems like it's going in that direction faster than we have anticipated.
And what makes you say this? What evidence do you have for this?
Okay. Well, the most obvious evidence is his control of the military. In the Chinese communist regime, he who controls the gun controls the regime, right? That has always been the case. But of the 7 Central Military Commission, the 7 members, the commission made up of 7 people, he's already lost 3. Removing himself, there are only 3 left. And then the 3 left are not his people. You know how they have different factions. So Xi Jinping completely lost the 3 members. 3 out of the 7 members.
So after him, there's 6 left, and he's lost 3 of the 6.
Right. And he lost 2 most important military leaders who are loyal to him. That's the 2nd vice chairman of Central Military Commission, He Weidong, who is responsible for the Taiwan operations. You know, if a war breaks out, Vice Chairman He would be the person responsible for that. And that man is gone. And then the second person who's extremely powerful in the military is the man in charge of personnel, who's an admiral, Admiral Miao Hua. He's in charge of the political work. You know, by political work, it means he does all the political vetting of all the officers, right? So he's in charge of personnel. That man is also gone.
What do you mean when you say gone?
Well, they're removed from their position. I mean, in the case of Admiral Miao Hua, he's officially announced he's removed from his post due to corruption. I mean, they never say the real reason, but it's always corruption.
And who are the people removing them?
The government, the central, the state authorities. Okay. In the case of the vice chairman, He, the man has been missing since March. And there are so many rumors about him being arrested, investigated, and the latest rumor is that he has died. You know, there are just so many, and it didn't came from one source, because if it came from one source, you could say, well, maybe that's, you know, just one source, but it has come from various sources, and some people say that he committed suicide, other people say he was executed. So you know, but everyone agrees, regardless whether the man is alive or dead, everyone agrees that he's gone. He's removed from his post because it's abnormal that he has not been seen for 2.5 months, you know, given his position. Where is he? If he's alive, you know, one thing that's very easy for Xi Jinping to do is just show him off. Well, there he is.
So who are the people pointing this out? Because I would imagine if you're the media in China and you start saying, oh, they whacked this guy to overthrow Xi Jinping, I don't imagine that's looked up to by the Chinese government. I imagine that you would be removed from your post if you were the media reporting on this, right?
Right. So that brings the next question: who removed these people? So the views are divided. So some people believe it's Xi Jinping himself removing his own people, but more and more people believe it's Xi Jinping's enemies removing his loyalists. Okay. And I tend to agree with the second camp. It is Xi Jinping's enemies removing his loyalists one by one from the military, and they're getting closer to him.
And who are his enemies within China?
Okay. Literally, it's almost everyone.
Oh, really?
Because he has alienated so many people.
Steve, is that your phone?
No, that's not mine.
Do you have your phone with you?
Probably.
Oh, I think it's dinging. That's okay.
Let me turn it off.
Yeah. No, you know, just to put it on silent.
Yeah,
It'll be
put
fine.
on silent.
Yeah. There you go.
Where were we?
Who are his?
Let me take a sip of water.
You were saying that. Yeah. You were saying that everybody in China opposes Xi, from the population to the military to the other high-ranking politicians.
Well, I mean, everyone suffered during COVID lockdowns. I mean, people have seen those videos where people were literally locked down at home for months, you know.
Did you see the videos of those cats on the side of the road in China?
Yeah.
Like all these house cats, like in a giant net or a bag on the side of the road. Crazy.
Yeah, there are people who literally died from hunger because of lockdowns, and these are not people in rural villages. They're in fancy apartments in Shanghai. They're expatriates living in China and working for multinational companies
that were not allowed to get access to food because they weren't allowed to leave their apartments.
Right.
That's so crazy.
You know, I mean, Shanghai is like New York. People don't stock up food at home. They always eat out.
Right. Do you know how many people starved like that?
During COVID?
Yeah, like in their apartments because they couldn't go get food. They couldn't leave. They couldn't order food or anything like this.
I know there were a lot, because I've seen videos where people, the first thing they did in the morning when they woke up is trying to buy food online. I mean, the way they bought food is online. You have to bid. You have to grab. You have to fight because there's only so much quantities to supply everyone. So you have to kind of just fight to be the first 100 bids.
Right.
Yeah.
So again, everybody across the board in China, in the political establishment and in the military establishment, opposes Xi.
Yes.
And what are the primary reasons for this?
Well, I shouldn't say everyone. Of course, he has his own followers, right? There's in CCP politics, there's a Xi Jinping faction. He has certain people in the military and in civilian government who are loyal to him. But those people, even though these people are loyal to him, it doesn't mean that these people don't have their own independent mind or thinking. But the majority of them are fed up. Why? Well, there were several events. One is the death of the former premier, Li Keqiang, who died in October 2 years ago. I think it was 2023.
Okay.
He died mysteriously. Many people believe Xi Jinping finished him.
Okay.
Because the man was healthy. He was only in his 60s, and he was swimming, and he died mysteriously. Now, CCP officials, their bodyguards and their medical services they are well taken care of. There's no way he would die while swimming.
Right.
I mean, his guard would first see him struggling in the water, in the swimming pool.
This guy's a big shot.
He's a former premier. He's like the prime minister.
So he's got full security all the time.
All the time. And also the hotel he stayed in had they had all these emergency medical establishment at the hotel, at the guest house. But when they tried to rescue him, they sent him to not a hospital known for cardiology, but they sent him to a Chinese medicine hospital. Why? And then it was further away from the hospital that's closer to the hotel.
Right.
That are known for its cardiology. So there's just so many suspicions around his death. And when that happened, it really sent shockwaves across the establishment, the political establishment. Because people think, well, if he could die, right? The second man, the second man in the government, who was a scholar. I mean, the man was harmless. He didn't even have ambition.
Right.
So that was the turning point. I think there will be dramatic changes across the Pacific in the next few months, precisely because of the power struggles in Zhongnanhai. As far as who will actually control China, or which individual or individuals will actually, be running China, will be decided in the next few months.
You really think so?
I really think so.
You think something's going to happen with Xi Jinping?
Something is already happening. Something is happening. But
you don't think he's going to remain in power for much longer?
He will. He may. There are four possibilities. Number one is he remain a ceremonial title as a symbolic national leader, but he has no real power. That's probably the most benign situation. And the second is he will step down, but with no repercussion.
Okay.
He will just retire.
And make an excuse for it or something?
Due to health.
Okay.
Number three is he will step down, but there will be repercussions. He will be blamed for the problems that China is having. There will be repercussions. Last one, this is not from me. People say he will die while in office if he makes everything too difficult. It's not entirely impossible.
He'll be assassinated, you think?
Because he's not doing well health-wise. This whole downward, how do you say? He started this descending. His power started to descend. I think it started from spring last year. We start to see. when he lost the man who runs his military. I mean, he lost the man who runs the general office of the PLA. It's the person is the equivalent of like a chief admin officer in the military. When that man left in April last year, people started to notice his power. And then in July last year, supposedly he had a major health episode. It was said that he basically passed out at a meeting. And now, when that happened, it created a power vacuum. When you were in a totalitarian regime, you could consolidate power. You control everything. But there has to be a premise. There has to be a condition. That is, you never pass out. You have to be healthy and stay in control. Because everything is in your hand. You have no successor. You have no deputy, right? You have no one to pass the baton to. So the underlying requirement is that you stay healthy, in power 24/7.
Right. And as soon as there's signs that that's going the other way or you're not maintaining your health, then the chickens are going to start coming home to roost.
Exactly. You lose all of that. And that's what happened to him last July. He passed out. People say he suffered a stroke. He passed out.
I can't imagine who would to report that.
Oh, it was at a meeting.
So it was public?
It was public.
There was I would imagine even if there was media at the meeting, they would say, don't you say a word about this to anybody or we'll execute you.
What I heard is all the media were forced to leave their equipment on site. They could not take any equipment with them. And they were all state media, state-controlled media, so they obey. There was no foreign media.
Right.
And it was a meeting with the top hundreds of officials. So no one was allowed to say anything.
So how did it get out that he passed out?
The rumors were wild. It was just everywhere. Everyone was saying indirectly. People were telling stories like, at the board meeting, the big boss, the chairman, fainted. And then so they were using euphemism to hint that something happened to the big boss without naming names, without saying what it is, but everyone knew. It was all over the internet and he disappeared for weeks. And then he reappeared. When he reappeared, it was an event to welcome the visiting Vietnamese leader. And then all the media coverage were wide shots. There were no close-up shots. It was all wide shots. And if there were close-up shots, it was frontal. However, the Vietnamese media leaked it. They took a side shot of Xi Jinping shaking hands with their leader. And you could see that there was a patch of his, in the back, a patch of his hair was removed, was shaved. So people immediately suspected that he underwent a surgery, a head surgery of some sort.
See, that's the confusing part about trying to figure out what's going on because how much of this is even American propaganda just trying to make China look weak, right? Let alone the Chinese propaganda.
American propaganda, American media is very much influenced by the CCP. They're very pro-CCP.
What?
That's what prompted me to do this program because I was upset watching how mainstream media...
Are we watching the same media?
Yeah, we watch American media. It depends on who you watch. Like, for example, New York Times is very pro-CCP, pro-Beijing. Did you notice that?
I have not noticed that, no.
The New York Times. I'll send you the picture.
I've noticed a shift over the last, I don't know, since probably the middle of the Biden administration.
Yeah, they started to shift.
It's been starting to shift away from CCP to be more anti-CCP.
Yeah.
But I would agree with you before that, it was very pro.
Very pro, yeah.
Like I have friends who are very pay a lot of attention to what's happening around the world and in China and other places, specifically China. And they have to, these are people that do a lot of research with these native countries' media outlets. Like they actually will go and pull up some of the reporting that's coming out of China or out of Vietnam or out of surrounding countries and corroborate it with what's going on in the U.S. Because the U.S. is nothing It's all over the place. It's going in every which direction. It's chaos. But to be able to corroborate that and try to like look at different countries' media outlets and compare it with the U.S. media and see what they're talking about and try to figure out what the truth is, it's got to be a very difficult thing to do because all these countries deal with propaganda. They're all trying to push some sort of a narrative.
Every country, you're right. Every country has propaganda. But no one is doing as sophisticated as the CCP. They're called the master of deceit.
Yeah.
They can manipulate public opinion in a way that you don't even notice it, right? I mean, think about Charles, what's that guy? Bieber? What's his name? Charles
Lieber.
Yeah. Charles Lieber. And there was another case that came out. It was a Fed. It was an employee. It was a director working for the Fed, the central bank, or the.
Really?
Yeah, who is in the same situation. He was approached by 2 Chinese students or visiting scholars, and who invited him on an all-expense-paid trip to China. And he went. I mean, they were doing scholarly discussions with him. They even arranged, I mean, there's also honey trap, you know. I mean, he eventually married a Chinese woman who's 30 years younger than him.
Wow.
And then he started, you know, leaking information to the Chinese. I don't know why I'm talking about that. So I'm just saying the Chinese study their subjects so well. If they want to change if they want to manipulate you, if they want to manipulate a group of you, they study you so well, know what you're interested in, and then they reverse engineer everything. And then so it happens so naturally that you don't even notice it. And that's how sophisticated Chinese propaganda is, you know.
Do you have any understanding of like the level of spy or undeclared Chinese influence in the U.S.? I know we talked about briefly that before we started, that there's these police stations here in the U.S. that I think just got busted, where China is trying to regulate the Chinese American population here.
Well, this is one area I think the United States government needs to pay attention to, because the Chinese government has a long arm into the internal affairs of American society. They have very good control of the Chinese American communities here. You know, a lot of Chinese read Chinese newspapers, but these newspapers are run by people who are loyal to the CCP. And also many Chinese, when they left China to come here, you know, the state security talked to them. You know, some of them have to agree to being eyes and ears for the CCP before they come. Yeah. A lot of them are. You know, they're not professional spies. These are not the professional spies. The ones that I told you at the beginning, the very ordinary looking, those are the professional spies.
So if you're a citizen of China, it's not just as simple as saying, "Hey, I want to move to the United States, fill out some paperwork." Bada bing, bada boom, you're on a plane to the U.S.
You do that, but if the state security, MSS, Ministry of State Security, is interested in you, they will talk to you. They say, well, you're on your way to the U.S.
How many people do you think that's happening to?
It's quite common. I know someone who were like that. I know that. I used to have a nanny who I suspect is one of them.
A nanny?
Yeah. Someone who is a living nanny.
Who you hired to watch your kids.
Right. Through a friend. I mean, she was not a total stranger.
And what made you think she was a spy?
A couple of weeks after we hired her, I have friends calling me saying that, Lei, you'd better not use her. I said, why? I said, we think she's a spy. And immediately I called the woman who introduced her to me, you know, because she was not a stranger I hired, you know, from the street or from nowhere.
Yeah.
It was through a friend But the friend said, I don't think so, because my friend knows this woman's brother and sister-in-law.
Okay.
She said, I don't think she's a spy. So I still don't know if she is a spy or not, but she has all the strange behaviors of a spy. For example, she called up my neighbor one day and asked how much it costs to take a cab. And my neighbor asked, well, it depends on where you want to go. So where do you want to go? And she wouldn't tell her. And then my neighbor goes, well, why don't you just ask Lei? If you need a ride to go somewhere, I'm sure Lei will give you a ride. And she didn't say anything. So my neighbor told me, say, your nanny is weird. She called us and asked us how much it costs to take a cab, and she wouldn't tell us where she wants to go. And then there was another time when I remember it was cold. It was in New England, so it was cold at the end of October, maybe in early November. It was dark and cold. She decided to take a walk with my daughter, who was very young at the time. I was like, why do you want to walk so late at night? Right? It was a little strange. I didn't say anything. So at the end of the walk, I asked my daughter, I said, well, what did you talk about during the walk? So my daughter said, her name was Angie. You know, she said, oh, we walked around the neighborhood, and Angie just wants to know where everyone lives. Because I have a lot of friends in the neighborhood.
Okay.
You know, I mean, there were kids, you know, I mean, the families, we you know, party together, you know, do the birthday parties together. It was all for the kids.
Right.
So they come to my house, we go to their houses. So she wants to know where everyone lives in the neighborhood. Of course, she knows my friends, right? But she would do that. She would get the kid, walk with her late at night to tell her. And I don't even know how she got their phone numbers. And
introducing herself to your neighbors.
Right. Because she never asked me to get phone numbers.
How old was she?
I think she was in her early 30s.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Maybe late 20s.
Okay.
Yeah. You know, and then I think what really she has two names. You know, I started calling her by her real name, the name on her ID, and she got really upset. You know, she wants me to call her other name. And I said, but that's your real name. What's wrong with calling you that? That's you. She got so mad. She was furious, was inappropriate. And then I said, okay, that's it. You know, I had two friends who, I think it was during the SARS outbreak. Remember back when there was a SARS outbreak?
Yeah, what year was that?
2003.
Okay.
2003.
Okay.
So there was a benefit concert held in the Chinese community to raise money for the victims or the people who got sick.
Okay.
And two friends of mine bought tickets to attend the concert, but they were not granted admission at the entrance. It was a Chinese community concert. It was organized by local Chinese organizations. You know, I mean, there's a student, I don't know. It was Chinese people active in the Chinese community.
Right.
And so they organized the concert. Two friends of mine bought tickets to attend the concert, but they were denied entrance. You know, and they asked why. They said, well, because the consul general from New York, China's consul general, is also attending the event, and you're not welcomed here. And they're like, why? It turned out that they said that you're Falun Gong.
You're who?
Falun Gong. It's a meditation practice.
Oh.
It's a mind and body practice that's being persecuted by the Chinese government. It's CCP's number one enemy.
Okay.
You know, but because of its popularity.
CCP's against meditation.
It's against the meditation. It's against Falun Gong's principle of truthfulness, compassion, and tolerance. It's like yoga. I mean, they have 5 exercises, slow motion yoga type of exercises. But it's extremely popular in China because of its health benefits. Even the high-ranking government officials practice it. So the CCP has been persecuting this meditation practice since 1999. And so when my friends went, they were denied entrance, even though they bought tickets, And they said, well, it's because you were Falun Gong. And then
So when you practice this meditation, do you register publicly that you're a part of this meditation group?
But they know. The CCP knows everything in the Chinese community. They have spies.
Even if you are practicing some workout routine in your own house in Massachusetts or wherever you live, they know what you're doing.
Yeah, they know what you're doing. They send people, if they want to control everything. If you're a group outside its grip, then it's not good for them. They will send people pretending that they want to learn the practice with the purpose to gather information.
Right.
Well, how do you know, right? Say you have a tennis club. Everyone there plays tennis. And somehow the CCP or the government wants to find out what you guys are doing. They send another tennis player to say, hey, let me join the club. Of course you're going to welcome him or her.
Right.
But that person's intention is to gather everyone's name, your contact information, find out what you're up to. So that's why they know everything. So these 2 friends of mine got denied entrance, and things got ugly because they got everything on tape. My friends got everything on tape. They filmed the entire episode. So as someone who is very, my name Lei in Chinese means upright and honest. And to stay true to my name, I'm like, this is America. Why should the activity or event happening in America be subject to the opinion of a foreign communist government? Just because the consul general is here so that Americans, we're not allowed to attend a council even though we bought tickets? So I helped my friends file a complaint with the message, the discrimination. I mean, it was the first step to file a lawsuit. You have to file a complaint with the discrimination commission in our state.
But these were Chinese folks not letting your Chinese friends
Chinese
in.
American, yeah. It was taking place in Massachusetts.
So Chinese discriminating against Chinese.
Right. Right?
Okay.
It is, I mean, it's a public event. It's a benefit concert.
Right.
I bought ticket.
So in your complaint, what did you say?
I said it's discrimination.
You said the Chinese are discriminating against the Chinese. Did you say why though?
I said because of the CCP, because of the persecution.
And you explained the whole yoga practice thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
I said because of the CCP is persecuting, the Chinese communist regime is extending the persecution from China to the United States. They're forcing the Chinese American communities to follow their policy here. But that's illegal. You can't do that here. Right? And guess what? The opposition, they hired one of the top law firms in Boston working for them pro bono.
China did.
Guess who's helping them? Right? And here we are. I'm using my salary to help my friends, So it was that was an event that had a lasting impact on me. In the end, we couldn't fight them.
Right.
How that just shows you how much control and influence Beijing has in America over the Chinese American communities. And all these law firms are lining up with them because the Chinese will promise you with business opportunities in China, clients. They could give you a large SOE, state-owned enterprises as a client for your law firm. They could give them so many things to these American institutions that I cannot. So to me, at that point, I know there's no justice. It's all about money.
Sure.
you know? So I don't know if that's tied to the spy. You know, I mean, it's been so long, so I don't even remember the time frame and all the details. But in hindsight, I started to think, well, is that because the legal case that I was involved in, I was trying to help my friends, that I was sent a spy nanny? I don't know. I don't know, but it's been too long.
Right. Yeah. No, it's a pretty crazy thought to imagine that all of the Chinese people that are living here in the United States who migrated here from China could be part of some sort of soft spy network, or that, especially if they have family that are in China, so that China kind of has leverage over them. That's kind of scary.
It is. My mother has a helper. You know, she's Chinese. And I mean, they have their WeChat. They use, you know how Chinese use WeChat app. And so my mother sometimes finds some interesting content and want to share that with her helper. The helper said, no. If it's against the government, please don't send it to me, because I still need to go to China. I cannot afford to lose my ability to visit my mom and sister in China. Please do not forward anything that's anti-CCP to me. And I'm thinking, this is America. Both of you are Americans. That's just how much fear she has. Of the 6,000 foreign students at Harvard, 1,000 is from China.
Wow.
And most of them, I think, are children of government officials, or they're tied to the government officials one way or the other, unless they would not be able to come to Harvard. An ordinary...
Tied to American government officials?
No, U.S.
Chinese
government officials. The Chinese students study at Harvard. You know, they're not ordinary Chinese students. They come from privileged Chinese families.
Yet these people who are top government officials in China are able to read the tea leaves or see the forest for the trees, whatever analogy you want to use, to realize that they're not in an optimal, ideal system in China. They need to send their people to the US.
Oh, yeah. Their kids, their grandkids are educated at top schools in the U.S. Columbia, you know, Harvard. Harvard is their favorite choice. Harvard is a Chinese party school. Not party school like having fun party school, but CCP, Chinese Communist Party School, Central Party School, because they have a program with the CCP to educate. The Harvard Kennedy School had a program to educate, to train CCP government officials. So they're like the Central Party School. So that's why they're so ideologically intertwined with China.
That's fascinating.
You don't even know how communist the Harvard University has become. I have a friend who went to the Kennedy School about 15 years ago. He's Chinese, and he said, "This is the stuff I hear here is no different from the stuff you would hear in China at the CCP's Central Party School." He said, "This place is as communist as you can imagine." That's why, you know, they're into so much trouble right now with this U.S. government. Because it's certainly not in the best interest of the America.
Isn't Harvard, I might be wrong, but there was a guy, you're familiar with Charles Lieber?
Oh, yeah, he's the head of the chemistry department, and he was sued.
Was that at Harvard?
Yeah, Harvard. He was sued by the U.S. Justice Department, right, for espionage, doing espionage work for China. Yeah,
exactly. I believe the story is he was working with two younger students from China, and he was caught getting paid a huge sum of money, in the millions of dollars, from China. And Steve, maybe you can find the actual report so we don't fuck this up too much. But then he went to prison, and I just read a report that they just let him out, and China hired him full time. So now he was living in China, working there full time. And he's a a nanobiologist. Here it is. Charles Lieber, former Harvard University professor, was arrested on January 28, 2020 on charges of making false statements to U.S. law enforcement and federal funding agencies about his involvement with China's 1,000 Talents Plan at the Wuhan University of Technology. He was charged with lying about his affiliation with the 1,000 Talent Plan and the Wuhan University of Technology, as well as failing to report income he received from Wuhan. He was convicted on December 21st, 2021 and sentenced on April 26, 2023 to time served, 2 days in prison, 2 years of supervised release with 6 months of home confinement, $50,000 fine, blah, blah, blah. Since his arrest, he has been actively seeking employment in China. So there's no report here about the latest news of him actually getting hired full-time by China and like getting a huge contract.
Yeah, he's in China. He's not alone. I wouldn't be surprised if there are more of him here in the U.S.
This also mentions nothing about the foreign nationals or the Chinese nationals that came here that he was working with.
That's why the State Department announced that they're going to revoke student visas for Chinese students.
They did?
Yeah. I mean, Mark Rubio just announced a few days ago that they're going to review or revoke some student visas given to Chinese students. Because even they're not professional spies. But if the government asks you to do something for them while you study in the U.S., are you going to say no?
Right.
Your parents still there.
If your parents are still there, that's an interesting dynamic. Yeah. What is this, Steve? The Harvard Crimson? Ex-Harvard chemist Charles Lieber joins Chinese University. Go to the first chapter or paragraph there. Former Harvard chemistry professor Charles Lieber, can you zoom in a little bit, who was convicted of lying to federal authorities about his ties to China in 2011, took a new job as professor at the Chinese University last week. Wow.
But you know what? I think his life in China will be difficult because that doesn't necessarily mean that the Chinese are going to trust him. You know,
even if they paid him millions of dollars, I'm sure they're going to be wary of his. Yeah.
The leftist Chinese are now saying that they shouldn't trust any students who studied in the West because they could be spying for the West in China.
Right. And if they knew I'm sure they know. You have to anticipate that if this guy is being released from supervision from the federal government in the U.S. and they're getting, we see that China's going to pay you this much money to come do this. Well, guess what? Now you have to spy for us when you go to China. And I'm sure that China would anticipate something like that happening.
So the Chinese students are really stuck because the Chinese enterprises, government agencies are not hiring Chinese students who were educated in the West for fear of espionage. Okay. And then they're not welcomed here either.
So if you are a government official in China, top level big shot in China in the government, in the CCP, and you send your child here to Harvard to work here, you're basically kissing your kid goodbye because he's never going to be allowed to come back and work in China, right?
Oh, if you're a big shot in the Chinese government, of course your kid is going to graduate from Harvard,
right,
and then go back to China and have a lot easier life there. You know,
and they wouldn't be worried about the kid being
if his parents is somebody holding important positions.
Okay,
I'm talking about the students whose parents are just ordinary people.
Okay.
Yeah.
I see what you're saying.
You know, the latest news, there was a news that went viral in China. There was a student who studied.
You all right over there, Steve?
Yeah, I'm eating at Tom's.
Oh.
There was a student who spent 8 years studying in the West, in the U.S., who went back to China. And this guy is extremely patriotic, quote unquote patriotic. He even studied Marxist books when he was in the U.S. so that he could understand the communist theories. That's how patriotic, that's how pro-CCP he is.
Okay.
So after graduation, he went back to China to continue his graduate study. Now, he got into trouble because he went to Tiananmen Square for an event. It was something, you know. He was supposed to go there with a friend, but the friend didn't show up. While there, he was detained by the police because the police thought that he was causing trouble. You know, the police thought that he was a petitioner. You know how Chinese petitioners, you know, disgruntled workers, you know, who want to go to Tiananmen Square to petition, you know, for their whatever, you know. So he was arrested by the police because they thought he was with the petitioners. But he wasn't. But what happened was he was showing sympathy towards these people. You know, he stepped up and asked the police to be nicer to these poor men who were there seeking justice. And so the police arrested him. And then after much, you know, investigation, they realized he wasn't with them. They released him. And then, but at school, the school dispelled him, discharged him. I mean, it was Tsinghua University. It was not a random school. It's one of the best schools in China. The school discharged him on grounds that he got into trouble. He showed sympathy towards someone he's not supposed to help.
Wow.
Just like that. All you did is just say, hey, tell the police, hey, you know, you shouldn't mistreat this old man. You know, come on. That's all he did in public. The school discharged him. The guy committed suicide. The young man he jumped. He's such a patriotic young man. Because think about it. He spent 8 years in the West. He has accepted Western values, right? He spoke up when he saw injustice. All he did was tell the police to be nice to the man, and he was arrested. The school immediately saw him as a troublemaker. Now, if he wouldn't be discharged if he didn't study in the West. His misbehavior plus his Western education was the problem. That combination is the problem. So you see how dangerous Western education can be. And of course, if this guy's father or mother is a big shot, and he could call up his parents or grandparents and say, hey, you know, help, I need help. Yeah. You know, and they could solve the problem for him, but he's probably an ordinary person, you know. Right. So, but he committed suicide. It became a viral event because everyone was saying, well, what did he do wrong?
He was so committed to the CCP and the ideology.
He studied Marxist works in the U.S. Just so that he understand what communism is all about. And he vowed to serve his country as soon as he graduated here and returned to China. Wow. Look what happened to him.
You've alluded to how insanely advanced their facial recognition systems are there. And I'm sure that is integrated with AI and monitored by law enforcement and the government to track anything. First of all, what is the crime rate in China if they're tracking and their punishment is so severe and they can find anybody for doing anything, basically anywhere? I would imagine there wouldn't be much of a crime rate, number one, right?
No, the crime rate is high.
It is.
Because people are unhappy because the legal system does not do justice for people. So people seek justice. People seek revenge on their own, you know?
But no, I assume not many people get away with crimes.
People don't care.
They don't care.
They don't care.
And what about as far as like the social credit system goes there? Can you, like, have you ever, obviously you don't live in China.
I don't live in China.
You're not under that, but you know people who do. What is your, like, how does it work specifically? Do you know?
Well, like say if your dad or if your child, let's say your dad, okay, made an inappropriate comment
on social media
against Xi Jinping. Okay. They could use that against you to say, when you're looking for a job, let's say, they're going to look up all the records of your family members to say, your dad is a problem. Okay. You know, he's a problem for you. We can't hire you because your dad has very low score. Stuff like that.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's mainly tracking how people interact with other people on social media platforms and like dissident type behavior and controlling people economically, right?
To shut you up, to shut people up.
To incentivize people to not talk
say
out.
anything. So as a result, but people are smart, so they come up with convoluted ways to make comments without sounding like it. So that's today's Chinese culture. They have created so many indirect ways or means to say certain things without to outsmart the AI.
Right.
Okay.
Interesting.
And then, but once it becomes too popular, then the government will flag that. That becomes a sensitive word. So they have like a huge list of, they have a huge library of sensitive keywords for the AI to learn. Okay, to a point that, like there are hundreds of variations of Xi Jinping's name that the AI has been trained on.
Wow.
Because people could be complaining about him without saying his name.
Right.
So they flag all these possible words that could mean, or words that could possibly mean his name.
Right.
Yeah. So it becomes to a point that you can't say anything. If this happens, the AI will break down. When this happens incessantly, the AI will either become stupid, totally stupid, or useless. Because you can't say this, or if they say this, it could mean Xi Jinping. You can't say, people have called him pigs, people have called him 200 pounds, people have called him like a think neck bottle.
Think neck bottle?
Yeah, like a flower vase, a thin neck.
Thick neck.
Not thick neck.
Oh, thin.
Yeah, thin neck.
Got it.
His name, Xi Jinping, literally means a thin neck bottle.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So anytime you say, well, I bought a thin neck bottle, flags. It got flagged.
Wow.
There's so many variations. So what are you going to do with a the AI is going to flag everything. When that happens, it's meaningless. You may as well let everyone say everything,
Right. Yeah. It comes to a point where
it defeats the purpose.
Yes, totally. Where there's no more, it's basically flagged so many, because you've created so many different variations of his name. Right. It's like, eventually it would get to a point where there's like, what's left? There's like no words left to use. We're going to make it ban every single word and flag everybody. And it's going to become unmanageable from the government's perspective. Right.
So that's what's been happening.
And they can control money, right? Where you can spend your money. Like if you're driving a car, you won't be able to get gas in certain places if you are banned from a certain area. So like they can turn off your money in certain districts, so you can only travel within, like, if you're on house arrest, for example.
Right.
You can only go to like work and back.
Yeah.
And you're not allowed to spend money anywhere outside of that.
Right. With bad social scoring, you're not allowed to leave certain areas, right? You're confined to that area. So if you go beyond that, then your digital devices will not work. Like you cannot buy tickets, or you cannot get on public transportation, or your banking will shut down when you go beyond that boundary. So,
and do you know people that have dealt with this?
Well, the people
personally?
I know, I don't, because I have very minimal contact with people inside China.
Okay.
So I don't know, but allegedly, but I read reports of people run into that, and now with the banking, with the financial difficulties, they limit the amount of money you can take out from your bank. Like if you want to take out certain amount of money, they want you to provide. They don't tell you cannot take money. They just make it so difficult that you may end up just giving up.
That's it. I've dealt with that here too.
Really?
Yeah.
It's happening in this country too?
Yes, it is.
Wow.
Yeah, I was recently trying to take a decent sum of money out of one of my bank accounts with one of the top banks based in New York, to transfer it to crypto. And it took me the better part of 2 months to get the wire to go through, because they were making me go through, and their excuse is they're trying to combat fraud. There's so much fraud that happens with, which is legitimate. There's a ton of crypto fraud that happens where they convince people to give us $100,000 for this, whatever it is. They want to make sure people know what they're doing and they're not being scammed for tons of money. So after going through this process like 10 times and them asking me all these questions, like what was the color of your first car? And, oh, you got that answer wrong. And are you sure what's the name of the website you're sending this money to? Who told you about cryptocurrency in the first place? All these crazy obscure things. And then, it took 2 months. I had to drive to like my local bank probably 4 or 5 times to explain to them what was happening and why I couldn't get through this. And they were like, we don't know why. They're not going to let you do it. I don't know what else to do. And I was like that close from pulling all of my money out of that bank and going to like another local bank. And I'm probably still going to do that, to be honest. But it's, that's a fucking problem. That scared the shit out of me.
It is
how
more
difficult
and more
that
difficult.
how difficult that was.
Banking is becoming more and more difficult. My advice to people is do not use Face ID, because I saw that, in China, you have to use your Face ID to access your bank.
You have to.
You have to.
Can you access your bank through like a mobile app?
Yes,
okay.
but the passwords, don't do it. You have to use your face.
Wow. So you're not allowed to have typed in passwords?
You are allowed, but you still have to use your face. You can use whatever password you want, but like Face ID is mandatory. There are so many stories that I read that older people that are sick they're dying, and they ask their children or family members to take money. They can't. The family cannot take money, and they have to get their face.
And they're dead.
They're not dead. But some branch require the person like in person.
Oh.
So they carry their elderly parents from the hospital to the bank branch to take money out. And one woman died in the branch.
Oh.
Yeah. And sometimes, when they have a deceased parent, they can't do the face recognition because their eyes are closed.
Right. What if they're dead? Then what?
Yeah. Then what?
The government gets all the money.
Yeah. They can't, So facial recognition is just I've seen that. And sometimes, I've seen my family members using that, Sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes it tells you you're not, I'm like, this is ridiculous. It's the same person.
Right.
But if you have a different look or whatever, they think it's not you. They just tells you, sorry, you can't access your bank account today. And you're like, huh? I'm me. And there's nothing you can do. You just have to wait. Now, it could be that the bank just decides that no more money taken out today. We've reached the limit. We've reached the threshold for the bank. It could be that. It could be, the bank policy, internal policy for the day. It has nothing to do with your face.
Right.
But it make you feel like somehow the app doesn't recognize your face today. And so when I saw that, I'm like, no, do not give your Face ID away.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's just so convenient.
Because it can be replicated. With AI and all these technology, I think it can be replicated. Right? And that's scary.
Yeah.